Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us and giving up your time this afternoon. For those that don't know me, I'm Josh Moore. I'm the marketing manager at Net-Ctrl. And Net-Ctrl, we're a technology integrator operating 22 years, and we specialize in 3 areas. So we look after cybersecurity, building management, and networking, the latter which we're going to focus on today. I've got a couple of people joining me today. So we've got Richard and Deep from RUCKUS Networks. And we've also got Ollie joining us from Everything ICT. So Richard and Deep are going to take the first slot today. They're going to be talking about considerations for the next generation networks and looking at future demands, and questions you should be asking yourself. So they're going to talk around that subject matter. Ollie is then going to follow. So Ollie at Everything ICT. So again, if you've not heard of Everything ICT, they are a DFE recommended framework provider. It's someone that we've been working with for I think it's about a year and a half now. So he's going to be talking around the benefits of using services like theirs to simplify, streamline procurement processes. And then after that, we'll finish with a Q&A. Just so you're all aware, the session will be recorded. I'll send a recording to everyone that's joined and everyone attending. There's a chat and Q&A box. So during the session, if there's any questions you have at all, please do there. If I'm able to answer them, I will. If not, I'll pose them to Richard, Deep, or Ollie at the end of the session. But look, that's everything from me. So Richard, Deep, I'll pass it over to you both.
Lovely. Thanks, Josh. So the purpose of today's session, even though we've got slides and even though they've magically appeared, it's not really to be too prescriptive about what your next generation network will actually look like. It's more just to raise a few issues that you need to be looking at along the way. So I think the first thing we need to understand is what's your next generation network likely to demand. Now, all opinions are my own, etc., etc. However, in my opinion, what we should be looking at is a network that supports wireless as the primary mode of access and at the same time allows for IoT. And I'll come on to that a bit more in a moment. So the first thing we need to obviously consider is the fact that we're optimizing for wireless access, but principally that's to access applications running in the cloud. We're speaking to lots of schools that are well on the route to going serverless. So they've moved, to Office 365, Apple, Google Classroom, even homework apps are now in the cloud. So with less and less on site, how can the network actually support that? And obviously that's just not the wired and wireless network, but that's also the network from your ISP. The network should also be designed to provide a flexible classroom space. So that means any education device from any user, whether that's staff or pupil, really should be able to connect to that Wi-Fi in a very simple and secure fashion. Now, it doesn't just have to be straightforward educational devices. That could even be things like gaming laptops if an esports session was in place. Again, all needs to be there and connect almost instantaneously because we can't have any gaps in teaching time. Increasingly, though, on top of that, we're also looking at IoT. So that could be from, depending on the school, from anti-vape detection, for example. It could be security cameras, means of locking down classrooms in some kind of horrific event. It could also be, and I've visited a school recently that's doing this, which is actually trialing air quality sensors within classrooms that links to air purification. All the means of making sure engagement between pupil and teacher is kind of maintained. So when we're looking at this, obviously that wired access layer is now kind of performing something different from before. Really, we're just looking at this aggregating wireless traffic because nearly everything is coming in via that route. So we need to make sure that wired network is now optimized both for the throughput of the APs, no matter what Wi-Fi standard they're running at, but probably more importantly, they're providing enough power. And that power initially obviously is for access points, but it's also for things like pan, tilt, zoom cameras, could be printers, and strangely my printer's just running at the moment. It could be absolutely anything, so we have to kind of think this through. And the final point, and one that's a particular of interest to me really, is making sure that whatever we put in place is actually right-sized for the school and for the individual classrooms. In the ideal world, we don't want to see your next network being exactly the same as the one before, but with a, potentially with a different logo on it. So obviously want that. We also want potentially not to have 24 or 48 port switches in classrooms with noisy fans. It might just be that we need smaller form factor units for different use cases. So next slide, Deep. Thank you. Right, so obviously that's kind of what we're all striving to get to, but how do we actually get there? Well, first thing is, are you sure you actually need to update your network right now? And the reason I say that is, how can you really be sure that it's the network holding you back? How do you currently quantify what a good experience or good network performance actually looks like? Do you have SLAs in place to show, oh, the network is degrading over time and so on? Again, increasingly, we're speaking to lots of school IT managers that, they want to get on and do other things. Whether it's, wider projects around software, wider projects around engagement and so on. But all they need to be able to do first is draw a line in the sand and say, okay, the network is now, performing at this level. That definitely mandates, a requirement for an update. So, I mean, Deep, what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, no, I often come across cases in schools where nothing is massively wrong with the Wi-Fi or the switching as such, but it's more as you've alluded to, the manageability of it. So whether that's day-to-day operations or troubleshooting, or even the impact of a configuration change. Like I've made a few changes and everything seems fine today, but is it really? And then, as you've said, building a case for SLAs or getting some sort of feedback on how is my connection to Office 365 doing, and all of that sort of information isn't normally there. And I think if I jump straight into demo, if I look at my network here, which is all cloud managed, I can have a look and say, give me an applications report of what's gone on. Oop, I love live demos. Who doesn't? So we'll go straight back in. And as that's logging back in.
Good that you're proving this is live, Deep. I like it.
Brilliant. So I want to see my applications report. So it's by default going to give me 24 hours, but I will change that to 30 days just so we've got some exciting information on here. I can see over the last 30 days I've gotten through 1.4 terabytes of data. What does that data look like in terms of receive, transmit? I can see a nice little word graph of the types of traffic that's going across, about 2,500 recognized applications. The top applications are listed here. Please do not judge me by these, but I do blame my children for them. But again, this is an overall report on everything that's going across my network. I can then drill down to an individual client or user and see the breakdown for that. So when I know what's going on and what sort of traffic's going on across my network, I can do things like look at putting in something from a service validation point of view, like an SLA test. So I can configure one up to run either daily, weekly, monthly, depending on how often I want this carried out. This is an example of a basic one that I've set up. This one connects to a particular network on a particular frequency, uses the pre-shared key. It's doing a simple test. It's just doing a simple ping to 888. It's also doing a trace route to comscope.com. And I've enabled the speed test on this as well, so it'll do some analysis on that. And what's come back for the network is we're good, everything's green. The ping time is 5 milliseconds, slightly quicker than it was last time. My average upload is 169 megs. It was 5 megs quicker than the last time I did the test, but again, well within parameters. My average download speed, 394 megs. 5 meg slower than the speed test that was run last time, but again, nothing that I'm particularly concerned about. I can then go into the details of this and have a look at it on an individual access point level. Here we see all the steps the test has taken. So whether that's authentication, association, right the way to the key, DNS, DHCP, etc. We can have a look at those upload and download values on an individual access point level to see if there's an anomaly. In this particular example, we can see they're all kind of within the same sort of performance as each other. And again, if we hover over the trace route, this gives us a breakdown of all the hops it's taken to get to that destination that we'd put in there. Now, all of this is doable on, CLI or manually. What this does here, it just gives us a nice window to have all this information represented graphically and the tests to be run autonomously and up for us to be alerted if any of these tests don't pass or fail.
So you can see on an almost daily basis, is my
correct.
network going downhill or is it remaining steady? Is this something I need to look into?
Exactly that, yeah. Now, in terms of that, is my network remaining stable? We can then look at things like config change. So again, I will do last 30 days for this one only. Well, although in the last 7 days, things look good, things are starting to improve. But if I look at it as an overall of the last 30 days, we can see that I've made some changes. So down here, we've got a list of all the changes that have been made. And what the AI has done in the background is correlated those changes to connections success, time to connect, etc. So if I hover over one of these, so if I click, let's say, time to connect, which is 80% worse, so it was 77 milliseconds before and 140 milliseconds now over this 30-day period, we can see that it's picked up. I mean, it's not guaranteed that this may be the change that's done the damage, but potentially, based on the time to connect, it's noticed that the client load balancing setting was changed. Now, that could be influencing the difference in time to connect. Another one, if I pick client throughput, again, it's only 8% difference. So again, that's not a massive amount. So I wouldn't personally be really trying to investigate. But if that was a big number, these settings here, stuff like minimum BSS rate or band steering. So I've turned band steering off. So actually, I'm probably using the 2.4 gig more noisy frequency, probably is impacting this negative change to my performance. This helps me see, first of all, would I notice the difference between 213 and 194 megs? Probably not, right? I probably would notice when it goes right down and everybody starts complaining. What this does, it proactively gets you to keep an eye on this network, and then when you see things are degrading, you can have the AI is telling you where to look rather than you playing guesswork.
Good. Okay, so assuming we've kind of taken away some of the daily burden, in terms of looking at how your network is operating, and you've obviously spotted that over time, the performance stats are dropping. You're getting more complaints, over time. So you kind of think, well, maybe it is time, to upgrade. I've had numerous marketing efforts come at me from, the vendors, my partner, and so on, telling me about Wi-Fi 7. Obviously we know that inevitably these later wireless standards are going to offer us, greater speed and hopefully greater reliability. But what impact is that likely to have on the wired network? Are we going to need to upgrade this everywhere as a result to support this?
So in short, yes. So we're at a point in time where the bottleneck is no longer the connection from the access point to the switch. I'm sorry, the bottleneck is not the clients to the access point, it is the access point to the switch. So the bottleneck's moved. Wi-Fi, even from Wi-Fi 5 onwards, if you had the right chipset and the right devices, was capable of hitting that sort of near gig performance on an individual client basis. We're at the point now where real life performance from a client to an access point can span multiple gigs. Now, what I find in schools today, the predominant port type is gigabit to the edge. which then means your access point is connecting to the gig, and that's where you've got that pinch point on your network. Now, it's definitely time to upgrade to above a gig, but this is one of those where it does depend. It depends where are you in your cycle in terms of your refresh cycle. So if you've only just put your brand new wireless wired network in last year or the year before, you may not be ready to actually swap out for a whole new network because you've just been through a refresh cycle. And I think in those scenarios, there's space there to go with a mixed bag of keep your current network and maybe add some complementary devices to it that give you that 2.5, 5 gig multi-gig capability for your newer wireless network. However, if you're at the end of a refresh cycle to your network, so you've had the network, it's been in for 10 years, it's done a really good job for you, I would definitely be looking at multi-gig as a future 5 to 10 year investment from today. Some of it also depends. I mean, it's great that we're calling out the bottleneck is between the access point and the switch. With more and more services going out to cloud, if you're doing Google Classroom, we're doing Office 365. If all of the services are outbound, we do also need to look at the connection outbound. So if we don't have multiple gigs out and there are no local services, the bottleneck moves further down there. Although having said that, I have spoken to several schools recently that have said that they're moving from their current 1 gig connection to a 10 gig connection, which to me sounds kind of scary. But again, once you've got that sort of pipe out, you need to really be addressing that wired. It feels very strange for me to say that the bottleneck is the wire, but yeah, to address that wired bottleneck.
Okay, perfect. So, I mean, obviously we're kind of all talking about Wi-Fi 7, but it's not purely Wi-Fi 7. I know the first Wi-Fi 7 access points tend to be the 3 radio access points, so a 2.4 gigahertz, 5 and a 6 radio. But that was also present, of course, in Wi-Fi 6E with many vendors. But obviously, more radios inevitably equals more power being required. What's actually needed there on the wired network?
I think you've just answered your own question. More power. So yes. So a little bit of explanation. For early access points, when we were talking about AGN, they could operate on PoE, which was 15 watts, and they were quite happy at that sort of power level. But as access points got more capable, so things like IoT radios were being introduced to them, when we saw the Wi-Fi 5 Wave 2 access points come in, also multiple spatial streams in those radios meant that the access points were consuming more than that 15 watts, actually well into that 30 watts of power, especially with most of the Wi-Fi 5 generation access points having a USB port for future compatibility. You found that actually you were well into using the 30 gigs. As you've said, Wi-Fi 6E upwards introduces a third radio. That only increases your power usage. Devices are getting more and more power efficient as they go, but if we're adding more to them in terms of more radios, more spatial streams, the efficiency is almost outbalanced by the drive for performance and connectivity. So as we move into Wi-Fi 6 and 7, the access points do get a lot more power hungry. Now, I can throw up a couple of examples of our Wi-Fi 6E access points. So the 560, for example, if it was running in full bells and whistles mode, it does need 32 watts. So it's slightly over what PoE Plus is. Now, fortunately, access points will run in a limited capacity when you give them only PoE Plus. The 560 just turns its USB port off. So actually, it turns that USB port off, but from a wireless perspective, it's going to serve Wi-Fi 6E clients just as it would if it was supplied with PoE++. If we move up the stack to our 760 access point, a more capable access point, that one in limited power mode turns off the USB port, it turns off its second Ethernet port, it reduces its maximum transmit power by half. So again, if you're designing a Wi-Fi 6E7 network, it's worth looking at all elements of the design when taking into consideration your switching network. So if you're going to put something like this on, you need to make sure those ports, as well as the 2.5 5 gig multi-gig that I mentioned earlier, you kind of really, I think power is probably more important, because if you're, if you don't have enough power, then the benefit of the technology that you're going for may not be there for you.
Well, I mean, I've seen this. So, I mean, I've seen a customer that was quoted Wi-Fi 6E, for example, not by me, I hasten to add. And due to the power requirements, or the actual power they could provide to those APs, the reality was the access points had just dropped down to running the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz radio. So they were kind of paying some kind of premium for Wi-Fi 6E without receiving, any of the benefits of it. Now, one thing I am conscious of, Deep, is obviously we've mentioned Wi-Fi 7 here, but at no stage have I got you to mention why, what actually is the difference between Wi-Fi 7 and the previous generations.
Yes, so without going into too much detail, because I think Wi-Fi 7 can be a webinar all in itself, but if I give the highlights of the differences, so we've mentioned the 6 gig frequency. Now that came in from Wi-Fi 6E onwards. So that's new for Wi-Fi 6E, and it's new again for Wi-Fi 7. So it's a new frequency that we can use. Right now, without going into too many details, depending on whereabouts in the world you are, you may have access to some of that frequency and not all of it. So there's still work to be done there on that 6 gigahertz. However, what Wi-Fi 7 does that 6E didn't do is allow you to aggregate a lot more of it together in terms of channel width. So previously, you could have channels as wide as 160 megahertz in Wi-Fi 6E. Wi-Fi 7 doubles that to 320 megahertz. And you would think, oh, so that means I've got double the bandwidth that Wi-Fi 6E provided. It's actually better than that. Without going into details of how the modulation works, but through more efficiency in the modulation of Wi-Fi 7, you can get 20% better PHY rates compared to Wi-Fi 6, just because of that modulation. The other thing that Wi-Fi 7 does that any of the previous standards hadn't done is the ability to aggregate the frequencies. So in Wi-Fi 6 and below, you are operating either at 2.4 gigs or 5 gigs, or potentially 6. In Wi-Fi 7, it's not or, it's and. You can operate at 2.4 and 5 at the same time, or and 6 at the same time. You can operate at multiple frequencies. That, I mean, on the surface of it, you can use it to just aggregate the bandwidth of all 3 of those frequencies. So you imagine that from a just a raw performance perspective. If you think about it from an interference perspective, so if you were sending information out on 2.4 gigs and somebody sets off a microwave, you just send the next packet out on 5 gigs. It kind of almost self-heals itself. But where I think it can really come into play is from a low latency perspective. So what I can do is I can make configuration rules to say, I want all of my super low latency traffic to sit on 6 gigahertz, whilst all my management and general traffic goes over the 2.4 and 5. What you then have is, whilst in the air, very low latency traffic over a very specific frequency. So letting you get to that near zero latency over Wi-Fi, which has previously been very difficult to achieve, even with the best efforts from a quality of service marking perspective.
So this is almost like wired performance now, really, for wireless, and being able to do, say, low latency stuff such as esports, even potentially over Wi-Fi.
Yes.
So, I mean, one thing I'm always kind of conscious of as a vendor is a lot of customers think, I must go with the latest standard. I must have Wi-Fi 7 or whatever. And I say this as a man that's still running ABGN access points in my home and, functioning perfectly well. So I kind of know the answer, but I'd like to know, your take on this. So Are we to assume Wi-Fi 6, 5 and 6 rather, is to be considered kind of end of life now?
I would say no. So whilst from an access point perspective, yes, Wi-Fi 4 and 5 are pretty much end of sale with most vendors. Wi-Fi clients, on the other hand, are completely different. So if we take an example of my Ring doorbell, it's a Ring doorbell version 2, the latest version of normal Ring doorbell. Guess what? It's got a Wi-Fi 4 radio in it. It's 802.11n, the Wi-Fi radio within that doorbell. We look at the Raspberry Pi, and again, I think Raspberry Pis are sometimes used in schools from a teaching perspective. The Raspberry Pi 0W or 02W, the latest one, it's a Wi-Fi 4 2.4 gig radio within them. So I think the thing here is, although from an access point level, yes, I'd say the answer to your question, Wi-Fi 5, 4, we can consider its end of life. But from a client perspective, we are going to see devices, not just legacy old ones, but even new ones being released, still using some of those old radios. And again, there's lots of justification for why a manufacturer would use those older radios. You know, it could be cost. I mean, a Raspberry Pi, it's all about cost. So if it just needs connectivity, doesn't need to have the latest generation Wi-Fi in it, so they'll pick whatever's efficient. So I think we will see them for quite some time yet.
Okay. So, and if for whatever reason, you know, whether it's just you want the 5-year lifespan, or you know, as part of your project criteria, if you do move to Wi-Fi 7, you know, how can it benefit not only Wi-Fi 7 clients that are coming, but also those, you know, say the long-standing clients that will be on the network for the next 5 years and have been there for the previous 5 years, and how would RUCKUS actually help within that?
Yeah, so I think the move to Wi-Fi 7 or 6E or 7 or whichever newer standard you're moving up to, it should be always seen as a future compatibility. So if you're refreshing a network today and you plan on not doing it again for another 5 years, absolutely, you go for a Wi-Fi 7. As newer and newer devices come out for that technology, you're ready to cater for them and cater for their performances. However, as you've mentioned, you would still have these older devices, right? And what RUCKUS has, I mean, if you're a RUCKUS customer already, you probably know about the beamflex antenna technology that would help with sending a stronger signal to Wi-Fi devices without getting into, again, beamflex is a separate webinar all on its own. But that technology, we haven't removed that just because it was there for a while. We've improved it, we've kept that in. So when you're connecting to a RUCKUS Wi-Fi 7 access point, not only are you supporting the latest and greatest generation of clients, but actually you're really doing a justice to these either legacy or potentially new devices that are just using very old chipsets. So you're keeping them happy, keeping them connected strong, and keeping that whole network overall, new and old, performing to its peak capabilities.
Fantastic. Well, look, I know we've attempted to cover almost too much there in a 30-minute session, but we just wanted to, as I say, just highlight some of the key things we think you should be looking at. And I said that first one really is getting a handle on how your network is currently performing. You know, when is it really likely to be under serious strain? But then also just a few considerations of what you do when planning for the future, whether that is the latest Wi-Fi type, what's going to be drawing power, you know, the network capacity versus my internet capacity, you know, balancing that out. Yeah, there's a whole lot to go into. We'd welcome any questions, but obviously in general we can give a more precise answer to you know, your individual design if you just get in touch with the guys at Net-Ctrl, and we can take it from there. Over to you, Josh.
Fantastic, both. Look, thank you for doing that session. And like Richard said, we're going to cover some questions off at the end. So if you do have any questions, or maybe even scenarios, that you find yourself in at this current time from a wide and Wi-Fi perspective, if you'd like some advice on what would Deep do, then please pose those questions in the Q&A box. But yeah, Ollie, are you okay to take over from now?
If I can work out how to share my screen.
There you go.
D6. Well, I'll do it the old-fashioned way. Can everyone see that?
It is just loading up now. Yeah, it's all up there, mate.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. No worries. And thanks for the intro. So yeah, my name's Ollie. I'm one of the directors at Everything ICT. Procurement can be one of those boring, dry subject matters. And I can vouch for that because I've chosen a career in it. But it's one of those important things, particularly for schools. We're spending public money, so we've got to make sure we're doing it the right way. So the next 10 minutes, I just want to give you a bit of background about our framework and some top tips about how to go about procurement. So Everything ICT was created in response to what we felt were the failings of the procurement market for schools. So these are the four main pillars of the things we spotted that were difficult for schools when tackling procurement. So the first piece was lack of expertise. It's really unlikely that schools or small MATs are going to have the budget to have a specialist procurement person on the books. So it's normally the last person in the staff room that gets lumbered with procurement as their responsibility. And it's a tough market to handle. The next piece is once that person is looking to a route to use, it's really confusing. There's loads of frameworks out there. How do you know which one's going to be best for you? There's ones for software. There's ones for print. There's multi-lots. They've got weird names with lots of different digits in them. It's really difficult to decide which way to go. And if you don't use a framework, tackling a PCR open tender by yourself is even worse. There's lots of steps to go through, and you've always got the back of your mind that fear of getting challenged. So really difficult to tackle by yourself. The third piece is the IT market in general is busy. There are thousands of companies all wanted to tell you that they've got the latest and greatest thing that they're going to sell to you. They're going to stick it on a lease and they're going to charge you this per month for the rest of your life. So it's really difficult to know who's good and who to trust. And then we felt that there's a lack of opportunities for SMEs. So particularly the larger frameworks, they are, they have a lot of the larger companies on them, which makes it more difficult for SMEs to win opportunities or even be involved in the conversation. And our observation is that it's the SMEs that are bringing the innovation to the market. These are the companies that are trying new creative ways of tackling problems that schools may face. So for us, it was important to give them a seat at the table and an opportunity for their voice to be heard. So thinking about those four things, we created a framework and structured, trying to make life easier for schools and MATs. So the first thing we did was we created a single lot. So no matter what you're going to buy to do with IT, it's just one channel, whether it may be an HDMI cable or your MIS system. It's just one route. The next piece is that having contracts all over the place is difficult. So we made this framework a sole supplier framework. So again, no matter what you're buying, your contract is actually with Everything ICT as the framework. We then place a subcontract on the relevant supplier that is going to deliver your service or product. that can add an extra level of insurance there. If it's a service deal, we sit in the middle. So if something goes wrong, you can contact us and we'll mediate through to a resolution, or if needs be, help you to exit the contract. We have a consistent personal services. I like to think that all of our team are nice. We don't use portals or anything like that. We're very much pick up the phone, old school. Tell us what your problems are, and we'll guide you through the process. We created a framework with customer-focused terms and conditions, so they're all in the favour of the customer. Josh will know this from the application to the framework. Some of them just aren't particularly attractive to a supplier, but we're here to the benefit of the customer. So all of the suppliers that we have on the framework have signed up to those, so that each time a customer wants to buy something from the framework, we know we have a set of terms and conditions that are agreed by everybody. Other frameworks on the market also only allow suppliers to join the framework at certain times. So they'll have possibly once a year, the framework will come up for renewal, and suppliers are able to apply to join. As we're a sole supplier framework, so effectively we are the only contracting party, it enables us to run a more of a dynamic purchasing system. So we can add suppliers to our group, our pool of registered suppliers, at any time. Again, that gives us the flexibility. So if you've got a supplier that you really like that aren't on any framework because they haven't felt the need, or they're new, they can apply to join our framework. They'll have to go through our evaluation process, but if they succeed, then you could absolutely contract to them. And one of my colleagues has recently described us as a dating agency, which I'm now using because I quite like it. We are here to basically matchmake your problem, your challenge, your procurement challenge, with a supplier that can deliver that service for you. And we know the suppliers, they've all had to apply to the framework, so we're going to match you to the ones that we feel are going to best meet your needs. So that will start. We started in 2014. I remember 2015 quite well because I think we did £30,000 in total sales that year. So it's really difficult to market yourselves out to the education space because nobody likes reading an email or one of these mass mailers. So we needed to just do a good job with the customers that did want to use us. And luckily in 2018, the DfE evaluated frameworks on the market and chose Everything ICT as one of the ones they would be happy to recommend. So we're now on the DfE website, and 2018 was a great year. All of a sudden we got lots of exposure and lots more schools and mats using our service, which was fantastic. That's it for me trying to sell Everything ICT to you. I find it a bit cringe doing it myself. So the rest of the slides are just talking about procurement in general. So frameworks itself, themselves, not just Everything ICT, but all the frameworks on the market are a good way for you to do your procurement. They're a safe route. They save you time because they have pre-evaluated suppliers. They've often got templates that and ours, for example, has some specifications that we're able to share from previous trusts that have used us. So, for example, MIS, we would have a starter for 10 specification for you. It's those consistent terms and conditions that are really beneficial. Again, that's all frameworks, not just Everything ICT. Frameworks know the process for procurement, so you're not going in blind. You can find out from day one what the date is going to be for the clarification questions, what the date is going to be for the submissions. You're just going into a machine that's going to give you the outcome that you want. And frameworks also give you that confidence that you're being compliant. There's been lots of things in the press over the last couple of years about suppliers challenging procurements and taking trust to court. if you do it through a framework and you do it in a compliant fashion against that rigor of the process, you're just taking that that fear out of the equation. So traditionally, there's two ways that you could go about using a framework or running a procurement in general. There's mini competitions and there's direct awards. So for a mini competition, generally they're used when you're not really sure what you want. You just know that you've got something that you need to fix or improve. You're not particularly wedded to a certain supplier. You want to test the market to see who's going to give you the best value. Your internal governance are probably telling you that you need to go out to market and run a formal process. So that lends itself to a mini competition. They take quite a long time though. So if you are going to undertake a mini competition, you have to allow it to run its course. It's really difficult to do those in a rush because of the amount of steps there are through the process. Alternatively, if you've already done a bucket load of work and you know exactly what you want, you know the supplier that you want to buy it from, you know that you can't get better value from anywhere else. For example, your supplier might have the deal registration discount, so you know that no other supplier is going to be able to beat their price. Then in those scenarios, a direct award is a sensible route to take because you already know who's going to give you the best value. So spending 3 months going through a mini competition is effectively going to be a waste of your time. So as long as you can evidence the fact that there's only one supplier that can supply you with what you need and it's going to be best value, then absolutely a direct award is the way to go. And we can do those in a couple of weeks. It's really as long as it takes to pull the final proposal together. So I've got a few top tips for you, and they're relatively generic, but hopefully they will help. First one is know your internal procurement limits. So often the Academy Trust will have certain levels that you need to do certain things. So 3 quotes over £5,000, formal competitive tender over 50, those kind of things. So knowing your statutory levels is really important starting place. Obviously I would say this, but I can't say it enough. I would really recommend using a framework. It just takes that pressure off you, and effectively the framework becomes your procurement arm. So if you don't have a procurement specialist at school, the framework then embodies that role. Plan ahead is one of the key things. So this is the time of year that we're getting inquiries for things such as IT support. Our contract's up on the 1st of September. Please can you run a IT support mini competition for us? Even now that's a bit late because if I run the mini competition and it's, even if I condense it, we're talking 8 to 10 weeks. Then if we're going to change supplier over the summer holidays, it's really rushed. So planning ahead, thinking about often a year out what you might need to go to formal procurement with is going to be a huge help. Nominating a procurement champion internally, we've seen lots of success with that. So again, if you don't have that head of procurement at your trust or school, nominating one of your staff to lead on the process, obviously they'd be supported internally, but having that champion is a huge benefit because then they take the ownership of the whole program, and often it's about winning the hearts and minds of your colleagues or other head teachers in the trust, because you might actually be changing a system that they love. So having someone internally that's leading the process that can have all of the information and share it with those people is going to be really key. And then the final point is talking to other trusts. So we do this quite often before undertaking a process. We will share a name or two from other schools and trusts that have bought the same thing that you're after, and they can tell you without any bias the glads and sads of the process that they went through, and any lessons learned that they might have had. So yeah, peer review is really good. So in a nutshell, I didn't want to spend too long on it because, like I said at the start, it can be boring. But frameworks are there to really support you through this process where you might not have the expertise internally, and we'd always love to help with any type of procurement, whether it is you just need to buy an HDMI cable or you're looking for a bigger project. We're here to introduce you to the right people that have the expertise you will need. So that's it from me.
Fantastic, thank you.
Well,
I can certainly attest. I know we went through your evaluation process, and it's lengthy. It's good,
yes.
but it's lengthy. But you know, hopefully from a supplier perspective, or certainly an end user perspective, it gives them a bit of knowledge and a bit of trust that you've done the due diligence, you checked the finances. I mean, I kind of recall, I think you had to speak to about 5 clients of ours for feedback on our experience. You know, were we innovative in our delivery? Were we you know, priced sensibly? Did we deliver what we said? So yeah, I know that it's certainly going to be a good supplier list that you do have there.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I guess as well, the proof is from clients as well. I think we've worked with you on many competitions and some of the direct awards. I think we've even, some of them have done the finance through the finance arm within Everything ICT, and the feedback has always been really positive. So, you know, it gives us trust as well when we recommending frameworks like yours, like on this call today. You know, it does have value. So look, that is both sessions. If anyone does have any questions, there is the Q&A box at the top or the chat box, either or. Indeed, I actually did have a question myself for you, maybe just a nice little recap on some of the bits that you discussed, but see, a lot of IT managers or network managers on this call today, if you had one piece of advice or some advice on where their focus should be right now with their network, what advice would you give, or what guidance would you give? If you're still there. Maybe you're not
still there. Here he is.
There you go.
There we go. Off mute. There we go. No, the one piece of advice, I think it's almost as I've been saying it all through. There isn't always a one fit answer, right? So have those conversations. Start considering early bandwidth requirements for everything, whether you're doing esports, whether you're doing CAD stuff. Bandwidth requirements are going up, and I think I think the advice that I give on the final part here is the consideration of both sides. So don't just think, yep, I'll throw a nice shiny new Wi-Fi network out there. Remember, it plugs into something, and just remember that.
That's a good answer, mate. Thank you. And Ollie, just a quick one for you. So for the people on here, where should they go for more information? You know, if they want to look at, even talk about the framework or understand the services you offer, how should they get in touch?
More than welcome to contact me or go to the everythingict.org website. There's loads of information on there. There's a couple of buyer's guides up there that you can download as a PDF if you need to share it with colleagues. But more than happy to jump on Teams calls with people if anyone needs more information.
Fantastic. No, thank you for that. What I'll probably do, Ollie, is I'll include your details on some of the follow-up emails that go out, so people have got that and they can obviously follow up directly with you in their own time. We haven't had any questions or anything come through yet, so I'll finish it up. You know, everyone, I'll send an email possibly tomorrow. They'll have a recording of the session we've just done. I'll include Ollie's details there. If anyone does find themselves in a scenario where they're unsure on that direction to take, maybe the current scenario, and they're just like, you know, where should that investment go, or maybe where should my next 2 to 3 years investment go, let me know. You know, we'll, like Deep said, you know, it's there's no one right answer, so we can advise. That is kind of our role to offer support in those cases. So thank you to everyone for joining. Thank you, Richard, Deep, Ollie, for giving us your time today. Thank you, and we'll hopefully speak soon.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye-bye.